Welcome to this episode of The Good, The Bad and The Odd One Out. This is solo, Mark, just me doing it on my own. I do this very occasionally, usually when I talk about Star Trek. And it's been a long time since I actually talked about Star Trek. The last one was October 2017. Given this is now July 2018, that's a long time, 9 months since I last talked about Star Trek. I put them on hold for a while, but I have started watching them again. So I am now back on track, I hope. And I'm hoping that I'll be watching one a week, which means about once every 3 months you'll get one of these shows, where I'll be covering half a season of Star Trek. Anyway, we are on Star Trek Next Generation, Season 5, Episodes 1 to 13. So what I'll be doing is just running through these fairly briefly. Rough thoughts, what was good, what was bad, what was odd, that kind of thing. Okay, let's just jump into this. So, the first one I want to talk about is episode 1 of season 5, which is called Redemption Part 2. So, it was kind of a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of season 4. Part 1 of this redemption, and this is really concerning the Klingon War. There's these two sisters called the Jura sisters who have suddenly pull out this little young guy who's a potential heir, pretend to the throne, and there's all that kind of stuff. And then some of the Klingon plotting and stuff is pretty cool. This one was a weaker episode than the one before it, but not bad. It unfortunately kind of tried to focus on too many elements, which dissipated the tension that was built up really well in the first one. There was an entire subplot involving Data being a captain and dealing with the hostility, which was, while it was interesting, I think it could have done with a whole episode on its own. I remember there was a Spock episode similar where they were in dire straits and Spock had to take command and he was kind of finding it difficult. The Data one could deal with that too, but they didn't do that anyway. But the little we were given it was pretty good, but it was all a bit underdeveloped and unresolved, which was a shame, really. Also, the Klingon stuff right at the end gets resolved a bit too pat. So there was a lot of time spent on Klingons drinking and headbutting each other and fighting. It could have done with a little less of that, though. That's always fun, and possibly a little more of the intrigue stuff. The whole appearance of Commander Sella, who's basically Tasha Yar's daughter. Half Romulan sort of daughter, I think, if I remember rightly, I'm a bit confused. She pops up well, and that kind of is leaves something to be resolved. Though having said that, I think that the introduction of that here maybe weakens this particular episode a little. I liked it well enough, but it could have been better, really. So that was episode 1. Episode 2 of season 5 was Darmok. Now, this was a very interesting one. It was kind of proper hard sci-fi, really, compared to what Star Trek usually does. It was about... It kind of goes back to the Wittgenstein idea that even if a lion could talk, because there's no common frames of reference between a human and a lion, they'd have trouble understanding each other. It's kind of like that. The aliens in this episode kind of talked by example, kind of, by talking about things that happened. It was all relative occurrences. And if you're not part of that framework, you do not know what they're talking about. And it took a lot before Picard kind of started to understand, but they slowly kind of understood. I liked it. It was quite impressive in what it was trying to tackle, and I thought it did a reasonably good job. It's somewhere between good and great. I can't work out. It's not the best of the best, but it's pretty damn good. Also, we get a young Ashley Judd popping up very briefly as a character, which is kind of interesting. This one, I think, has a lot of memes associated with it, because of the repeating phrase in it, which I think was Darmok and Jalad at Taranga. Sorry, I got that wrong. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. I remember that. Which is kind of fun. So good one to watch, I think. Episode 3 was called Ensign Rowe. This, again, was a hard-edge episode, but it was more politics than sci-fi. Basically, we seem persecuted people starting to turn to violence to try and get things done, because trying to put up with stuff and the Federation not stopping it, and they've just got sick of it. And now they're starting to sort of use violence as a means to get to an end. Interesting, given sort of some of the state of the world now and in the past and stuff like that. I also like they introduced this new character, Ensign Ro, who's from a race called the Bajorans, who are actually the persecuted minority here, suffering at the hands of the Cardassians. So we got Michelle Forbes here as Ensign Ro, and she's quite an atypical Star Trek crew member. They're all a bit anodyne, aren't they? You know, they all have their personalities, but they're all quite, you know, of the same type. They obey orders and so on and so forth, which you kind of expect with Starfleet, right? They're kind of brought up that way, but it makes them all a bit homogenous. But anyway, so Michelle Forbes here, she's kind of stropping. I kind of like it. This wasn't her first Next Generation appearance. She appeared in the rather wonderful episode called Half a Life that was the end of season 4 with David Ogden Stiers. She was his daughter in that, and she was pretty good in that. And I find her an interesting character. So it appears from this episode she might be like a new main character on the bridge, kind of that. But unfortunately, she kind of phased out, which is a shame. I think she's rather good, and kind of a question of Picard and her not resistance, but she's kind of not just accepting authority at face value. And she's also got this weariness to her that I kind of like. It's a fine episode. It's politics, and there's also a conspiracy where it turns out one of the Federation admirals might be in the league with Cardassians and stuff like that. I really like this one. Good solid episode. So we get 2 in a row, really solid episodes there. Episode 4 was called Silicon Avatar. Silly title really, but it's a solid episode. There was an actress in it called Ellen Greer playing a character called Dr. Mara. Really good performance, really good. I don't recall seeing this actress in anything else, but I must have seen her in something. But she really knocks it out of the park. She's quite she's quite a player here. She puts on a good job, and the writing's good as well. So you know the great acting, the great writing really complement each other. She develops quite a relationship with Data, starting with anger, but then she kind of softens when she realises it's not really Data's the issue, and they start to bond, and you start to feel the devastation of her loss. And I really like the fact the episode doesn't cop out at the end. The one weakness of the episode is it's got some really bad CGI, really bad. It did look like, it was funny, the whole episode did look like it was going to be some sort of Riker love fest. It started with Riker getting a date at the beginning. You thought, this is going to be all about Riker, but they kind of, it's a bait and switch and turns into a completely different episode. I kind of like that. This was another good episode. So, we've got 3 in a row here. They're doing quite well. Episode 5 was called Disaster. This is kind of a Star Trek version of a disaster movie. It was bits of airport, bits of Poseidon Adventure, Tower Info and stuff like that. Yeah, it was ambitious, but it kind of had too many balls in the air. And unfortunately that kind of dissipated the tension. It was pretty decent though. I like the area with Troy and O'Brien. Had the most potential, really, because O'Brien's wife was somewhere else on the ship, giving birth while he was trying to sort this out. But unfortunately, it wasn't quite as good as that section wasn't quite as good as it could have been. There was also kind of a cool thing where the captain was looking after kids. That kind of worked. And my favourite part, personally, was when Worf was stuck with O'Brien's wife while she was giving birth. And he's a bit cross because she's not doing it to a certain standards he's used to. He's kind of cross with that. Troy being in command section was a bit silly because there's no way a counselor would take a command of military kind of thing. Even though she ranks higher, there's just no way she should be taking that level of command. She should obviously hand it up to someone who knows what they're doing. But didn't think much of that idea. Yeah, and like I say, I did kind of like the Picard helping the children, which kind of reminded me of the pilot episode where, Picard's kind of helping Riker to help him deal with the children on the ship. But Picard did pretty well, really, considering. Which brings me to episode 6, which isn't a great episode, but it is a fun episode. I have to give it's fun. This one was called The Game. Now, I've actually rated this one 5 out of 10. and I have to tell you, mostly it's terrible. But there's certainly some elements in it that are so mind-blowing it kind of raised the score up. So it's kind of like a mix of 2 or 3 with a few 7 and 8 points, really. So the score doesn't mean it's a median episode. It is a bad episode, but it's quite entertaining. Right, this one... by the way, we get Wesley visiting in this one. So Will Wheaton pops up, which is kind of cool. The whole crew kind of get addicted to this kind of game app where all they're doing is kind of controlling little like discs flying in towards these trumpet-like flower things in a bad VR sort of simulation kind of thing. But it kind of gives them a weird... Unfortunately, it appears that it gives them like a sexual kick when they do it, which is... really weird to watch. So, and these little tuber flowers that the discs are flying into, they're horrible early 90s CGI. It's really bad. So we get to see Wesley kind of disturb his own mother, interrupting her mother playing the game, and she appears to be kind of mid-orgasm, so there's that really uncomfortable moment. We also see what is effectively a sex scene between Troy and a chocolate fudge sundae, and that's before she even starts playing the game. So you could cut. There's a kind of hormonal thing in this episode, I'm sure it is. And Riker interrupts her. She's going to cross because she wants to eat the fudge, which sounds bad. There's also a bit where Wes is sharing a lift with this woman who's playing, and she's going, "Oh," and it's kind of Wheaton's looking around uncomfortably in this lift. It's kind of, wow, what the hell is this? There's also a really weird bit where Picard is talking with Wes, but he's drinking tea, and his tea set's enormous. He's got this massive silver tea set. It looks, I don't know if it's perspective with the camera or something, but it just looks ridiculous. Also, Worf gets to make a pound cake, which is interesting. Also, there's kind of an interesting scene where they realise Wesley isn't playing the game as much as the rest of them, and they kind of force him to start playing it. In a Clockwork Orange moment, they're kind of pinning his eyes open. And we also get to see Wes earlier and later kind of putting the moves on Ashley Judd again, who appears in this role. And it's kind of a very sweet romance. I felt the romance really good. Wes was definitely better written character in this one than he was in the early ones. He's a more slightly rounded character. He's not as annoying as he can be in some. It is ultimately, though, a terrible episode. It's trying to be the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but it feels more like watching a Power Rangers episode. But it's kind of quite entertaining. It kind of does make you think, oh, is this prescient? It's kind of showing games that are so addicted to people, sort of distracts from people's real life, which is the way of the world, isn't it? So, some people could praise it for that, but it's kind of interesting that the central tenet of this game is like mini accomplishments that keep you playing. It's kind of going on here, but it was strangely sexual too, so there was that problem. The next episode, I'm going to address 2 episodes of one because it was a double episode. Unification, right? So we get Leonard Nimoy turn up in this one, awesome as Spock. So that kind of adds a lot to it. It's a pretty ambitious episode. It's really about the potential reunification of Romulans and Vulcans. Share a common blood lineage, but Romulans went their own way and didn't sort of give up their emotions, and they're certainly more warlike and sort of conniving. But they do have this common ancestor, and there is a feeling that they may converge at some point. And it's interesting because it's a galactic episode in many respects. It has Vulcans, humans, Romulans, Klingons, Ferengi, and others. We get a kind of fun scene where Riker's kind of playing detective, and we find out he's like a keyboard whiz as well. We also see Sarek in this one, and it's kind of a swan song for him, really. I'll say no more about that. And we also get this rather fine trio of Spock, Data, and Picard. Would you have liked to have more? I'd like more adventures with these guys, but we got this, right. But it was kind of cool. Also, we get Sela popping up, daughter of Tasha Yar. She's up to no good. And she's got this plan to take over. This basically, it turns out, is kind of a bait and trap It's a reverse plan to kind of take over Vulcan by the Romulans, we find out. There's some good scenes. There are some good scenes. There's some good scenes between Data and Sela, for example. There's a few clangers as well, but there's also some really good ones. Basically, whenever Picard's on, or when Spock and Data interact, there's a great scene between Sarek and Picard. And there's even a little scene between Data and Spock talking about the nature of humanity, where I have to say Nimoy was absolutely... He only had a few lines, but he was absolutely amazing. And there's also a final scene between Picard and Spock where they mime mode, which I thought was pretty good. I did like this. Bits a bit dull, I have to say that. But, there was some really good stuff between sort of Spock and Data and Picard. There's a bit that does make me laugh where Stella's talking to Data, and she says something like, "I'd rather enjoy writing. I don't get to do it very often in this job." And Data says, "Perhaps you'd be happier in another job." It's very funny. So solid pair of episodes there. Recommended. I wouldn't say top tier, but very good, very good. So number 9 is A Matter of Time. Here we get Matt Frewer's in this episode is this kind of quirky future historian who's visiting the Enterprise and say while they're on a life-saving mission, and he basically goes around annoying everyone a bit in almost every scene. He's kind of said, "Oh, I can't tell you about this because I don't want to change things." He even managed to put the news on Crusher reasonably successfully as well. He's kind of charming. Matt Frewer really worked in this. I think this character would have been way too irritating for this episode to see without someone who has the charisma of, say, Matt Frewer. I mean, it doesn't have to be Matt Frewer to have done this, but Matt Frewer was a good choice. And apparently they wrote it for him, so it kind of worked out. The last act was a little disappointing, but the setup is very intriguing. I rather like that. It did make me laugh that Troy didn't see through this guy, and that's her job, right? She's got one job, she just didn't see through him. That kind of made me laugh. She's so useless. So mid-tier. It's 5 out of 10 kind of episode. Right, number 10 of season 5 was New Ground. This is kind of a dull entry. It's kind of worthy but dull. Basically, we have Wolf Jr. turning up because I think his parents feel that maybe he needs to be with his father. Sorry, Wolf's parents are looking after Wolf Jr., basically, Alexander, I should say. And Wolf's trying to sort of keep him in line. And he's been a little tinker at school, we kind of find out. And it's funny because he's kind of a little slight character, but apparently he's lying, stealing, bullying at school. And all that's going on. Meanwhile, there's rather an unengaging subplot about creating these special magic waves in space, soliton waves, so ships can surf everywhere super fast. But that the experiment goes wrong and it becomes the galactic equivalent of a tsunami, and they have to kind of fill out that one. This, to me, is definitely a filler episode, weak episode. I'd give it 3 out of 10, actually. It's a not a great episode. Okay, number 11 was Hero Worship. This one's got similar themes to the one before. Not quite the same, but similar. It's called Hero Worship. It's interestingly directed by Patrick Stewart. Probably encouraged by Jonathan Frakes, maybe, I don't know. But basically, we get an orphan kid. Something happens to this ship, and they find this kid who's orphaned, who starts to bond with Data. And it's kind of like watching a newly hatched Gosling bonding. And basically he starts to pretend to be like that, an android. And it's basically a coping mechanism to cover for the loss of his parents in this accident. And he kind of also feels responsible somewhat for the accident, even though it turns out it wasn't. So there's a bit of that. It's very worthy, but it wasn't fun. There's also another shockwave moment, which kind of reminded me of the previous episode again. So they were very similar. This was weaker even than the previous episode, in my opinion. Next, come to number 12, Violations. This was weird. This felt like Star Trek going into horror somewhat. I quite liked it, but it was just surprising. It almost went into exploitation horror. Basically, they were talking about mind rape. And it's conveyed quite effectively. Basically, these people are kind of doing stuff and then things start turning weird, and the way it's shot suggests weirdness going on and creepy music and stuff like that. It reminded me a bit of Nightmare on Elm Street kind of movies. There's kind of revelations about aliens that can look into people's minds, but one of them's kind of exploiting this for something else. Basically, Troy seems to be the target of things here in a quite nasty way. So it came as a surprise after the 2 previous Bland episodes. And the only thing wrong with it really was the resolution was rather milquetoast. After all the real nasty stuff, if they really stuck to their guns and stayed with the nastiness, it could have been quite an exceptional episode. The writing didn't quite work as well. There was some issues with the writing. As I say, some of the scenes kind of seemed out of line with Star Trek. It was almost like watching, well, I don't want to say Twin Peaks, but maybe some of the nastier episodes of the X-Files fused with Star Trek, really. It was a bit odd, really. Yeah. I think it probably got its cue from, I think in the early 90s and the late 80s, there was a lot of like memory resurgent sort of pop psychology stuff. So I think it's kind of inspired by that. But yeah, interesting episode. And that brings me to the 13th, the last one I want to talk about, which is called the Masterpiece Society. This one involves a genetically engineered society of humans who want to keep a certain order. Everyone's got their place in this society and keep it well running, but some of them are getting a bit antsy. So it's like, what do we do here? Because when the Enterprise in sort of turn up, it's like some of them want political asylum. It's like, well, if we do that, we're kind of maybe violating the Prime Directive. But it goes, yeah, but this is a human society. It's not an evolving society. So yeah, there's all that this, that, and the other. It's a slightly dull one, and it's dealing with big things, but it's kind of dull, I have to say. It's dealing with eugenics, which kind of goes back to Khan and stuff like that, but it fumbles it, I'd say. Though there's some kind of nicely delivered lines by Patrick Stewart right at the end that I kind of liked. But otherwise, it was pure in the middle Star Trek Next Gen, really. Not outstanding. So I think the standouts from this, good and bad, are probably the first episode, the Redemption episode, the Darmok episode. Ensign Ro I kind of liked. I'm going to just say the first 4, actually, are all pretty solid. The game, only because it's so utterly bizarre, is probably worth a watch. Unification 1 and 2 are good. And I think probably their Violations was kind of interesting just to see something so different in Star Trek. So there you go. Go with those or not, whatever you like. So hopefully I'll be doing another one of these covering the second part of season 5 in about 3 months. That's kind of timelines I'm looking at. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll be back with Sam next time on The Good, The Bad, and the Odd. Bye from me.
Across the universe. On the Starship Enterprise under Captain Kirk. Star trekking across the universe. Slowly going forward 'cause we can't find reverse. There's Klingons on the starboard bow, starboard bow, starboard bow. There's Klingons on the starboard bow, starboard bow, Jim.
Life, Jim, but not as we know it, not as we know it, not as we know it. It's life, Jim, but not as we know it, not as we know it, Captain.
There's Klingons on the starboard bow, starboard bow, starboard bow. There's Klingons on the starboard bow, starboard bow. Star trekking across the universe. On the Starship Enterprise under Captain Kirk. Star trekking across the universe. Only going forward, still can't find reverse.
It's worse than that. He's dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. It's worse than that. He's dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. Dead.
It's life, Jim, but not as we know it, not as we know it, not as we know it. It's life, Jim, but not as we know it, not as we know it, Captain.
There's Klingons on the starboard bow, starboard bow, starboard bow. There's Klingons on the starboard bow, starboard bow, Jim.
Starship Captain James T. Kirk.
Ah, we come in peace, shoot to kill,
come in peace. Shoot to kill, men.
It's worse than that, he's dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. It's worse than that, he's dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. Dead.
Well, it's life, Jim, but not as we know it, not as we know it, not as we know it. It's life, Jim, but not as we know it, not as we know it, Captain.
There's Klingons on the starboard bow, starboard bow, starboard bow. There's Klingons on the starboard bow. Scrape them off, Jim.
Star trekking across the universe.
On the Starship Enterprise under Captain Kirk.
Star trekking across the universe.
Slowly going forward and things are getting worse.
Engine room. It's just that.
You cannot change the laws of physics. Laws of physics. Laws of physics. You cannot change the laws of physics. Laws of physics, Jim.
Oh, we come in peace. Shoot to kill, shoot to kill, shoot to kill. We come in peace. Shoot to kill. Scotty, beam me up.
It's worse than that, he's dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. It's worse than that, he's dead, Jim. Dead, Jim. Dead.
Well, it's life, Jim, but not as we know it, not as we know it, not as we know it. It's life, Jim, but not as we know it, not as we know it, Captain.
There's Klingons on